I just hit record. So yeah, so it's Monday. We've been reading the Ramayana. I know you all have been busy with assignments and exams and stuff, so maybe you haven't been able to, let's say, keep up with the reading, but our exam is going to be next week. Maybe that's a good way I can scare you guys into compliance. Not that I love scaring you all, but it's college, that's what people do. So, yeah, the exam is on the way, right? We're here now. Exam is next week. I'm going to give you a review sheet later this week before the next class, and then we can go over that on Thursday and on Monday. And if you have any questions or anything, we can go over them in class. But I've said this before. I'll say it again. The way you do well on this exam is you read this book, right? And it's not short. The number of pages is pretty high. It's pretty easy to read though. Like compared to the 12 pages of Doniger, I think the 30 pages of Ramayana is actually easier. So um, again, it's up to you to figure out how to manage that. Hopefully, over the weekend you have some time to read. My hope is that it's also kind of enjoyable. I hope you see it as not this burden you have to get through. I mean, it is a lot like reading a novel, a little more involved, but it's not so different from reading a novel. So I hope you find some pleasure in it, if that is possible, right? Remember, we talked about pleasure. Um, just to recap, it's one of the two major epics of India. So we talked about epic literature in Greece, right? The Iliad, the Odyssey. This is kind of like the Indian parallel of that type of literature. I think I told you this before, but this is a modern prose version. The original one is longer. It says it's shortened, right? The original one, and I think a translation of the full Ramayana is coming out this year. I think like it just goes to show this is one of the most important works of Indian literature, and the whole thing is just being translated into English like this year. So it's like an incredible undertaking, and we are reading a shortened retelling is a good word, right? Put it in the chat. It's a retelling. It is not a translation, which it's related, but it's shorter and easier to understand.
Professor?
Yeah.
When I went to the library to check the book out, I wasn't able to find the one with the exact picture, but I was able to find this one, which is.
Oh, let me bring up your image. Okay. Okay. That looks good. Is that Penguin Classic?
Does that work?
It should work.
It's.
So this is actually a good education moment, right? You guys maybe have never done this with a book. So, you open the book, at the bottom of this opening page, it might say Penguin Books at the bottom. What does it say? I can't
This
really
is not. It says Aubrey Menon.
Okay, so that is
It was the
probably
only one
not.
I was able to find.
Okay, so that is not the one we're using. So the one you want, you can get it at the bookstore. It probably costs like $10, maybe 15. The person you want is Narayan. That's the name you want to see, right? He's the reteller. There are different editions. The first one came out in the 70s. The one I have in my hand right now is from 2006. So, anyways, I like that you went to the library. That's exciting. I feel like a lot of people don't go to the library these days, and so I'm happy to hear that that's an option. But if they don't have this particular book, again, please buy it because I only asked you to buy two books for the class, and this is one of them. So anyways, yeah, if any of you have the same problem that Simone has, you need the book now. You can get it at the bookstore. You can probably get it at whatever, I don't know, like a Barnes and Noble might have this book. I would recommend looking for it first. But yeah, at this point you're sort of in a time crunch, and so I would recommend um, going to the bookstore and just getting a copy there because you can get it immediately. But thank you for asking because that helps clarify things for you and for everybody else. Yeah, does anybody else have problems getting a copy of this? Okay, so hopefully you all have it by now. I've heard there's a PDF floating around. I don't have it, so I can't give it to you, but maybe one of your classmates can. That's not something I can really help you with. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, if somebody has a PDF they want to share with Simone, maybe send her a direct message and don't get me involved because it's probably illegal. So here we go. Ramayana. It's ascribed to the sage Valmiki. You don't really have to know that. It takes place in Ayodhya. You don't have to know that, but it goes to show like this is sort of like Homer in Greece, right? This is said to be told by someone, a sage, right? A special person in Indian history. It was probably composed in the first, second century, but it's based on all these old stories, so it's a little hard to really nail down exactly when it came out. And just to sort of recap what we've seen so far, it's the adventures of Rama and Sita. We haven't talked about Sita yet, but she's the other person on the cover here. It's about them, their companions, and their struggle to defeat Ravana and his demonic armies. So, that last part might feel a little dramatic, like it's some sort of Lord of the Rings or something, but it's kind of similar. You do have a demon bad guy who took over the world with these armies, and they're struggling to fight against it. We'll see some other parallels between this story and some other stories we've seen before. I think we'll focus on the more next time. This time we'll talk about some other things. But any questions so far? So we kind of set things up last time. I introduced you to Rama. We learned that he's an avatar, right? What is an avatar? So just so we have our names out, Rama.
Like a different version.
Say it again.
And then like a different like version of him, but like that is like allowed to come to Earth or something.
That's pretty close. So Rama is an avatar of whom?
Of Ramayana.
Ramayana is the name of the book. Good guess. You guys don't remember? Look at your notes. Don't you take notes? This is why you take notes, is you can't remember everything. Don't you remember the blue guy, the ocean, the snake? We like.
Is it Vishnu?
Sita?
Say it again.
Is it wait, never mind.
Okay. So I understand y'all are busy, but if you can't get very basic ideas from class, like we spend all class talking about a particular concept, we watch a video clip. Yes, thank you, Dorian. You guys are making me nervous here. Give me a heart attack. All right, so Rama is an avatar of Vishnu. Again, 3 words, right? You got to know who Rama is. You got to know who Vishnu is. Those are both names. You got to know what an avatar is. So I understand it's a little challenging, but like that is the big takeaway from last class, right? We need to know what an avatar is. We need to know what Vishnu is. So who is Vishnu anyway? Who's Vishnu? A god. Very good. Yeah. So it was
Is
the
he
blue
like the
guy we
main
saw in the
god?
video last time. Lauren, what were you gonna say?
He's like the main god, right? Like he's like
He's
They
definitely
run-
one of the main gods. There are a few main gods, but yeah, he's definitely one of the main gods.
Isn't he like the protector of the universe? And he rides that gold chariot thing that we saw?
Yeah, he's the preserver. And he rides on the snake. At least that's what we saw last time. I don't think, did we see a gold chariot? There could have been one, but I don't remember. He's the preserver. There's the creator, the preserver, the destroyer. If you think about it, things have to be created. They come into existence, then they exist for a while, then they die, right? That's what happens to you. That's what happens to the world around us. That's what happens to everything, right? And so Vishnu is the one that helps us stay alive, helps us stay well. He is a protector, he's a preserver, and there's a god for sort of each of those stages. And Vishnu is the preserver. Okay, very good. So Rama comes down. He is the avatar of Vishnu, like Harrison was saying. He's sort of a different version of Vishnu. Maybe a better way of putting it is he's a human form. Avatar means to cross down. So a god has crossed down and taken on the form of a human. We talked about how there's an avatar in Christianity, otherwise known as Jesus, right? Which is a little bit of a weird thing to say, but it's actually pretty appropriate, right? So Rama is very much like a Hindu Jesus. Can you see the connection there? So the similarity definitely stops at some point, but there is some similarity there. Other things? Are there any other details we learned last time that you guys want to share with the class, just so we're all on the same page? Who's Ravana? I just told you here, but somebody put in your own words. Who's Ravana?
He's got a lot of heads.
It's got a lot of heads. Yeah, so that's one reason I give you all these pictures, is because it's a lot of names. It's a little hard to keep them straight, but once you get images of them, it's actually pretty easy to remember. So you got the lot of heads. He's a demon. That's very good. We didn't actually hear him talk at all or really meet him, so to speak, but we will. And so he's the bad guy, right? So Rama's the good guy. Ravana's the bad guy. All right. So last time we just covered like the early life of Rama. This time I'm gonna make you guys do some work. So get ready. But first, I'll tell you one more story. There's this story of Mahabali we didn't get to. It's sort of a frame story. Have you guys ever heard of frame stories before? What's a frame story?
Does that mean like it's a side story? Like it's like from like it's like off of like the main one?
Yes, exactly. So we get a lot of those at the beginning here, right? We get Mahabali's story, we get Ganga's story, we get Ahalya's story, and we're gonna skip Ganga's story. It's interesting, but we just time is short. We'll come back to Ahalya's story today, and I want to address Mahabali's story too, because this one's it's sort of like foreshadowing. I'm giving you a lot of like English class words, but we can read this as literature. There's some foreshadowing here, right? So let's go over the story. Again, an image helps me and probably helps you remember the story. Can you tell what's going on in this image? I guess maybe I'll give you a chance to shine. Does anybody remember this story and would be able to tell it? I know that might be asking a lot, but I got to open the door if anyone wants to shine. If anyone wants to flex, right? Isn't that what people say? A chance to flex. All right. So Mahabali, he took over the world, right? And so this is a story about someone who takes over the world. We could say he's an upstart. Have you ever heard that term before? An upstart, a person who has risen suddenly to wealth or high position, especially one who behaves arrogantly, right? So someone who rises up in power and behaves arrogantly as a result. So Mahabali is an upstart, and Ravana is also kind of an upstart, right? They're challenging the social order. So there's a parallel here. Okay, so what happens? Let's look at the book. So obviously, if you have the book, please take it out. We're talking about Mahabali's story, which is on 13. If you don't have the book, like we were just discussing, get the book because you're going to do bad on the exam if you don't have the book. If money is a problem, let me know and I can try to help you out. But do get the book. Again, it's college, you need books. All right, so Mahabali, he's an upstart. He takes over the world. I believe he is just a regular human. I don't think it says anything about him being a demon. There could be versions of this where he's called a demon, but this one, they don't call him a demon. He's just a regular guy. And, he's having a good time. But Vishnu and all the other gods, they look down and they think, you know what? We gotta kind of put things back in order. This guy Mahabali is getting a little too big for his britches, so we gotta come up with a plan. And so they send down Vishnu in a different avatar, right? So Vishnu goes down in a different avatar. So Vishnu crosses down in a different avatar. What is the avatar? What's special about it? So again, Rama is the avatar for most of the story, but this is a story about a previous avatar. So there are different ones. I'm not going to ask you to know any others, but it just goes to sort of illustrate the point of what is an avatar. The gods can come down in many different forms, just like the gods in Greek mythology. They come down as animals and humans and all sorts of stuff. What's the avatar here? If you don't know, you can look it up. Again, I'm pointing you to page 14. Who's got it? I guess actually really
So
starts
I
at 15.
found the online version, very
Okay.
legal. And the question is, who is Dasaratha?
That's a different story. So we're looking at chapter 1, Rama's initiation. Mahabali's story is the subheader. Mahabali's story. And I don't think we even get the name. I'm not looking for a name. I'm just asking, Vishnu comes down, and what's his deal? It's an important part of the story. That's sort of where the story starts. So again, turn to this page, Mahabali's story, page 13. What you guys are showing me is that no one actually has the book, which again makes me very nervous because it's open book. I mean, why are you shooting yourself in the foot? You're going to totally bomb this exam if you don't have this book. You got to get the book, guys. Come on. Bottom of page 14. Sorry, bottom of page 13 and on to page 14. The very bottom line on page 13. What does it say? Now I need to like prove, you need to prove to me that someone actually has this book. Otherwise, I'm going to, again, have a heart attack.
Does it say every autumn I looked forward to Diwali?
That sounds nice, but no. I think Simone is desperately trying to cooperate, but she already admitted she doesn't have the book. We need someone else
Are you
to.
talking about the Brahmin family of tiny proportions?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Lauren. So the gods are asking for help. In response to their appeals, Vishnu took birth in a Brahmin family as a person of tiny proportions. What does that mean? I'm like,
Are they're little people?
go ahead, Lauren. You said little people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just like usually
Is
happens
that what
in
it
this
is?
class,
Is it just literally that?
it is just literally that. As usual, you know, I ask you a question, the answer is often on the slide, right? They call him a dwarfish man, and dwarf is probably not the most sensitive term to use in today's context. So, you know, I apologize if anyone doesn't like that word, but that's what this book says. So he comes in as a little man. That is one of Vishnu's avatars. He's this little man. And so he comes in, Mahabali sees him and he thinks, hey, this seems like a pretty cool guy, right? He just seems like a very holy person. I'm gonna give him a gift, right? And he's like, hey, what can I give you? Right? I quote it right here. He says, I'm a conqueror. I'm very unholy compared to you. You seem like someone who's very special. You seem very holy. I want to give you a gift. What do you want? Ask for anything and I can give it to you. And the dwarfish man's like, no, no, no. I couldn't, you know, impose upon you in this way. They have this sort of polite exchange. And then finally, the dwarfish man says, well, how about this? I'm going to take 3 steps, and I would like the land that is measured by those 3 steps. And of course, Mahabali sees him, and he thinks, oh, you're so little, you're so cute, you have such little feet. Are you sure you only want this little 3 steps of land? And Vishnu, right? Vishnu in this little man form says, yeah, that's all I want. So they make the deal, and then what happens? It's a trap, right? So Vishnu then immediately expands to this giant size, as you can see in the picture. You guys can see the picture, right? I'll zoom in a little bit more. He expands to the giant size. This is Vishnu in the background, sort of being like, yeah, this is me, guys. It's almost like a weird spirit thing going on. Who's this guy down here?
Is that Ravana?
It is not. Because again, this is a frame story, right? This is throwing back to a different time. I guess this is harder than I thought it was going to be. This is, wait for it. Does anybody know? Who is this? Who took over the world in this frame story? Mahabali. Okay. Goddamn. All right. You guys are like pulling teeth here. Yes, it is Mahabali. That is correct. Thank you, Doria. So, all right, it's a trick. So he makes it look like he's very small and he's just asking for this small gift. But in the end, he rises to this huge form. He takes 3 steps. One covers all of earth, one covers all of heaven, and the third one, because he's already taken everything back, the third one, he's like, where should I take this third step? And Mahabali's like, you know what? You got me. Why don't you take the third step on my head, right? And so he does that. So again, this is a frame story. How is this a frame story? Because, and this is probably why you guys were confused. I mean, obviously it's because you didn't read it, but if you did read it and then you were confused, it's because Mahabali is sort of like a foreshadowing for Ravana, right? He's the bad guy who took over the world. He's the god who came back to kind of put things in order, but he didn't use violence. They didn't fight a war, right? How would you describe the tactic that the gods used to take back power? Are you guys just like totally not feeling it today?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the book.
That's okay. It's a lesson. Like he shows the example. They used a tactic that tricked Mahabali. Yeah, he tricked him. Exactly. It was deception. It was a trick. It was a trap. It was a scam. Have you guys ever gotten scammed before? Right? So this is actually something I feel like we don't often encounter in our everyday lives here in America, right? We often don't fall prey to tricks. But especially if you're like a tourist traveling around, this is something that'll happen to you, right? People try to scam you. Has anybody ever been scammed? Well, ever? Like traveling around in New York, there's some scams you could fall into, but again, I think they go more like Times Square and that kind of stuff. You guys ever been scammed before?
Yeah, like one time I like bought like some clothes from like this website, and then like they like never came in the mail.
Exactly. So that's a great example. There are tons of scams on the internet. It's very easy to get scammed on the internet. Angel has never been scammed. I find that surprising, but you'd have to think about it. There's a version of that book in Apple Bookstore. Maybe that's the right one. Yeah. Email me after class, right? So this is something, again, I'm not here to like rag on you guys, but like I've been saying since day one, get the goddamn book, right? So please, just, so send me an email and I can help you get the book if you guys don't have a copy of the book. But yes, exactly. So you can get scammed on the internet where people say they're gonna send you something and then it turns out they just take your money and don't send you. I'm surprised there aren't more scams on the internet, to be honest. But I guess you know if you're careful, you can avoid these things. Here, the gods tricked Mahabali, right? They tricked him into being generous, in fact, right? And then they sort of switched it up on him. And once he agreed to being generous, they took even more than he had offered, right? There's some saying about this, right? So like, if they give an inch, you take a mile or something like that. How does that go? Anyways, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. So anyways, this is it's an important story. Why is it an important story? As we've said, it's foreshadowing. It shows kind of what's going on in this story. It shows that the gods don't like these upstarts. It shows there's a background of people trying to overtake the social order, right? Challenging the social order, and then the gods coming in and shooting them down. So now it is your turn. I don't have high hopes because you guys have demonstrated that you don't really feel like looking at the book, but prove me wrong, right? Because again, all I've asked you to do is to have the book and bring it to class. And so those of you that do have the book, I want you to go through these examples of women in the Ramayana and come up with a sense of how they are depicted. So here is a little worksheet. And I think I told you, I'm going to put you guys to work today because this will give you a chance to figure out what this book is about, right? I can lecture you and basically tell you what the book is about, but that would be very uninteresting. So I want you guys to work through it together. I want you to think about how women are depicted in the Ramayana. Duty, success, pleasure is still part of the conversation. How does the pursuit of these three things by the women themselves, but also by the men around them, affect the way that they are depicted? And we've got many examples of women, actually. Tataka, we saw last time. Who's Tataka? We saw her at the end of class. You guys remember that? We were told not to think of her as a woman, right? Why aren't we supposed to think of Tataka as a woman?
Isn't she like a demon?
Yeah.
Like a monster?
She's a monster, exactly. Yeah. So Rama killed her, right? He shot her with an arrow. Pretty violent stuff, actually. It's a pretty violent book. I don't know if you picked up on that yet. So she's one figure you can talk about. We didn't learn very much about her. She's on page 11. Again, if you have the same version as I do, if you don't, it's chapter 1, right? It's the first chapter. Chapter 2, we meet Sita. Chapter 3, we learn about Queen Kaikeyi and her handmaiden Kuni, both women. And then in chapter 4, we get Surpanaka. She actually has another name, Kamavali, that we can talk about in a little while too. We'll just call her Surpanaka though. So those are a bunch of women with page numbers and chapter numbers. So I want you guys to now discuss what's the deal with these women? What's the deal with duty, success, and pleasure in relation to these women? And yeah, just how are women depicted in the Ramayana? So that is my task for you. Are you guys up for the task? Do you have any questions before I set you free to figure out what this book is actually about? Because again, this is in your interest. I want you to know this book. And if you display to me that you don't, I will have no mercy on the exam. So it is up to you now to figure out what this book is about, all right? I like being your friend when being your friend means you guys don't do the work, then I get upset. So, all right, are you ready? Do you have any questions for me? I'm going to take attendance, and then I'm going to set you off on your task, all right? Grumpy today, but sometimes you got to be grumpy, right? I like being your friends, but today I can't be your friend because many of you have proven to me that you don't have the book, which again breaks my heart. I know the psychology of it, right? It's like, okay, the professor has told me to get this book, but I know books cost money, and I would prefer to get a book for free. And there are many ways to get books for free that professors might not tell us, but I know how to get books for free. But I've already told you, I know those tricks, right? I know how it goes. I have a ton of books. I have way too many books. I don't have a ton of money, and so I try to get PDF books too. There is no PDF for this book. There is one, but there are no page numbers on it. So don't get that. I mean, if you must, but again, you're just making your own life harder. It's so much nicer to sit in a comfortable chair and get a hot drink and sit and read this book. It's a pleasant experience, or at least it can be, and that's why it costs money. You know, back when I was a chemistry major, I had to buy like textbooks for hundreds of dollars. They were literally $100+ every semester buying these textbooks. And then I would sell them back and make maybe a fraction of that, sometimes very, very little, sometimes more. So anyways, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life, but I am here to say, if you don't have this book, you are creating problems for yourself in the immediate future. And I encourage you in the future, if you ever are in a class and you think, yeah, this professor's telling me to get a book, make sure you can get that PDF before you decide not to get the book, right? There are different versions of books. There are different editions. I've told you this. This is a modern prose retelling of the Ramayana by R.K. Narayan. If you don't have the Narayan version, you don't have the book. And again, you're screwing yourself. So I wouldn't encourage taking that approach. You're going to have a hard time on this exam. So you're not giving yourselves a chance, really. And again, I will have no mercy. I'm going to ask very specific questions that come directly from this book. You don't get this book, you will have a problem. Am I clear? Any questions about that?
No.
Okay, good. All right. Now, again, I apologize for being grumpy, but it is part of my job to be grumpy sometimes. So let's turn finally to this discussion. Why am I being grumpy? Is because, wait, it disappeared. Oh, it's reloading. Is because you can't turn to page 11 if you don't have a page 11, right? All of your PDF versions don't have a page 11. And so again, you're screwing yourself, right? You won't be able to find page 11. So we can't have this discussion. You can maybe search for the name Tataka, but again, you are causing problems for yourself. I'm not going to force you to show me the book. I'm not going to force you to take a selfie with the book and send it to me, although I could do that. I'm not going to do that. I am just going to continue to try to work with you all, tell you the chapters so you can find them, I guess. And in the future, maybe we'll actually be able to have a discussion about this book. But it's disappointing because we're going to finish this in a week, right? We're basically wasting our time talking about these things that I've been saying for a month, more than a month now, right? All right, so who actually had a conversation? Were any groups actually able to talk about the contents of this book and not just sort of sit silently with their screens off?
Yeah, me and Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, my group did too.
All right, so there were a few conversations. Who wants to share what they came up with?
So, in my group, we mostly discussed Sita, and we talked about how she is the ideal woman. She is loyal to Rama, and one thing that we did talk about was how her father, I think, the king, he basically treats her as an object. She is made to be the prize of this game, and that is how Rama ends up marrying her. And I think it says a lot about the way women are portrayed as objects and transactional things for men.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what we talked about.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. I think we should definitely be clear that this is a patriarchy, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard this term before. People talk about dismantling the patriarchy, blah, blah. And just like the caste system, right, which we talked about last time, if we are interested in dismantling social systems or, in just understanding them, we have to understand them first, right? And so I think elements of this persist in our own society, obviously not in the same way, but just like Isa was saying, Sita does not exist as an individual, right? She exists embedded within a whole social structure. And so what social structure is that? It's her father's family, right? She is her father's daughter. And then she passes from being her father's daughter into being Rama's wife. And she does not exist as an individual outside of those contexts. That's very common for a patriarchal system. And here, just like Isa was saying, we see a pretty clear example of that. Have you ever heard stories where like a man kind of wins a woman, right? Maybe you've heard of a trophy wife. It's kind of a similar concept where a man wins some contest and gets to marry the woman as a result.
Oh, one other thing was Queen Kaikei.
Mm-hmm.
She's supposedly well, she's a queen, and because she's a queen, you assume that she is smart and knowledgeable about the way that things in her kingdom works.
Mm-hmm.
And she has Rama banished so that her son can become the king, even though that she should know it's impossible because Rama's the rightful heir to the throne.
Yeah.
So that's a very stupid thing on her part.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's a good summary. That's actually one of the more complicated parts. And if I weren't ranting about books all class, then we could have covered that in more detail. We still have 15 minutes, but let me just see real quick what Harrison's saying. So it's sort of a general concept. All right, so I'll read it. My group talked about that each character and how they were looked at in the story. We came to an agreement that these women were either well known and liked or being despised. And it's kind of like treating women either good or bad. There was no in between. So that's a great observation, Harris. I like that. I like the general argument. If I saw that sort of thing in a paper, I would say, give me examples. So one thing that Aista was doing a moment ago, that is what exactly what I asked you to do. So thank you very much for doing that, is looking very specific examples from the story and then using those to inform the argument. So I'm sure Harrison does have examples, and I'd be curious to hear about what they are. So just so we're all on the same page, before we move on from Sita, So here is, again, a picture. They help me remember things. Oh, and one thing Dorian asked about, and actually a few folks from his group asked about, is what are some reading strategies? And this is a good question, right? So reading is hard. We live in an age, and this is why I'm being so grumpy about getting the actual book, is we live in an age where you don't actually read these things anymore, right? I'm not exaggerating. Even though it's my job to read books, I very rarely get to read books because I'm always doing this, right? I'm always scrolling on my phone, reading some post, reading some this short little thing. And if it doesn't sort of pop and jump out at you like a tweet or something, then I don't have time to read it. Now we are learning, in this class, we are learning how to read slowly and carefully. And some of you might be concerned, like, wait, but reading takes hours of my very busy life. And I would say, what else do you got to do? Scroll on Instagram for a couple hours instead? Yes, it does take hours. It absolutely does take hours. So if reading 30 pages takes an hour or two, or even three, then you are doing it right. Yes, that is how long it takes to read a book, is it takes some time. Sometimes it takes longer, right, to read it well and to get every detail. To skim it takes less time, right? There are different ways to read, but I encourage you to read carefully and slowly to the extent that you can. Now, some people said, hey, is there a way I can sort of get a summary of the book? Because this is really hard to understand. And again, my heart goes out to you. What I would say is yes, read about it on Wikipedia, watch a video on YouTube. I know that's what you do to teach yourself stuff. That's what I do to teach myself stuff too. I encourage you to do that, but then read the book. Because your exam is not going to be about Wikipedia. Your exam is going to be about this. You're not going to be able to escape reading this book. If you don't read the book, you're going to do bad on the exam. I promise you. So please heed my warning, which I've been saying since the first day of class. Get this book and read it. And you might even enjoy yourself. I know it's unimaginable for many of you, but please, please, please get the book. Please read it. So yeah, coming back to this. What is Rama doing here? Can you tell what he has in his hand? He has this giant bow. And so this was the competition that Aista was talking about. Rama had to string this giant bow. And because it is so giant, it's very heavy. Actually, in this image, it's not so impressive, but the image I got as I was reading it was like this enormous thing that was very hard to bend, right? Very hard to, you have to sort of squish it down and then tie the rope, and then you can let it go again. And that's how a bow works. It's sort of taut and you let go and you can shoot it. I don't find Queen Kaikei to be completely responsible for what happened. All right, so you guys want to talk about Kaikei, so we can get to that too. But just like I used to say, he won the competition, and so therefore he gets the wife. Duty all over the place, right? We talked about love as pleasure or some transcendent thing. Here, love is duty. You just do what your daddy tells you to do, then you do what your husband tells you to do. Okay. I guess before we move on, thoughts on Sita? Anything else to say about her? We'll have more to say about her. Again, here she is, Sita. Move on to Kaikei. Let's move on to Kaikei. So what's the deal with Kaikei? It's actually really complicated. Angel says he doesn't feel like she's completely responsible. Can you say more about that? Why do you feel like she's not responsible? Maybe he's typing. I'll give him a chance. Just to sort of summarize, because the king promised her two things. Yeah, so that's actually what we got right in front of us. What a coincidence. Boons. What is a boon? And again, this is why reading takes time. As you come across a word, you might think, I don't know that word. And you might need to look it up. We talked about language learning in one of the groups. I've learned many languages. And learning a language takes time, right? You go through, you hit a word you don't know, you have to look it up. If you don't look it up, every time you encounter it, you won't know it. And you'll encounter this word again, actually. So what is a boon? Was it Isa or who just unmuted?
Me. I said it's like a favor, a wish. It's an IOU.
It's an IOU, exactly. It's a favor, a wish. It means actually a bunch of different things, but yeah, that's exactly what it means here. So the king offered her these two favors, right? And like Angel is saying, it's easy to blame her for what happens in the story, but it's actually not totally her fault. So maybe we can rewind for a moment and just sort of go over it. So we've got the king. Here's the king right here. the king is the father of who?
Rama, Rama's brother-in-law, and also like 3 other people.
Very good. Yeah. So this king, King Dasaratha, he is Rama's father. Queen Kaikeyi is not Rama's mother, but she's the mother-in-law, so close enough. She has her own son, in fact, and she wants her own son to be on the throne. It's not only her, in fact, it's her own family wants her son to be on the throne, and so she basically pressures the king to get her son on the throne. What do you guys remember? What her son's name is?
Wasn't it Bharata?
Yes, Bharata.
Bharata?
Yeah, you might be wondering, how do you pronounce that? The H is sort of silent, so it's just Bharata. Bharata. And I think the accent is on the first syllable. Actually, the list of character names tells you where the accent comes in if you guys are curious about that. Just because so Bharata. See, the quotation is after the first syllable there, so that means you say the ba first. So the Bharata is how you say his name. Okay, so she wants her son Bharata to be on the throne. What does she do to get that? Well, she says, hey, king, you made these 2 promises to me back in the day. Can we make good on those promises? And of course, in this world that is dominated by duty, right? If you make a promise to someone, you got to keep that promise. And, there obviously not everybody does, but he's a man of his word. He keeps his promise. And what does she ask for of him? What does she ask in return for these promises that he made? The 2 boons. She wants 2 things. What does she want?
Did she ask an exile for Rama?
She asked, say it again?
An exile for Rama?
Exile. Yeah, exactly. Exile. Exile for Rama. And just like we talked about, that's because she wants her own son on the throne. And that's the other thing she asked for, right? Is to get rid of Rama, send him away for, I believe it's 14 years, right? I could be wrong in that, but I'm pretty sure it's 14 years. And then put her own son on the throne. And so how does the king feel about that? Does he want to do that? He doesn't want to do that.
No. And doesn't he die after Rama gets exiled because of like sadness and he's depressed that his son is gone?
Yes, he dies of a broken heart. Exactly. All right, good. See, my own broken heart from the beginning of class is starting to heal. Thank you, guys. I was getting scared for a little while there. So yeah, there are a lot of different slides I made about this. This one is actually, I think, a helpful way to think about it, right? If we put this in terms of duty, success, and pleasure, this is the map that I came up with. I'd be curious to hear what you guys talked about because I wanted you guys to think about duty, success, and pleasure. How is Queen Kaikeyi going after success over duty? This isn't the only way to think about it, but this is how I am suggesting. This would be my argument. Pleasure over duty from the
Wait, is
king.
this like how like she like exiled herself for her like son?
She exiles her son. Yeah, exactly. So her duty as a mother-in-law is to take care of her son-in-law. Or is that the word? Son-in-law? That's not right. She is foster son? No, half son. I think it's technically half son because she
Stepson?
Stepson? Yeah. Let's go with stepson. I think half son, I think, is actually what it is. But anyway, let's just say stepson. That sounds right. So her duty as a stepmother is to take care of her stepson, right? And of course, she doesn't worry about that. Instead, she goes for success. Why is getting her own son on the throne success for her? What does that have to do with success?
Because it puts her in a better position of power. Because if Rama was the king, Rama's mother would be like the king's mother. And since there's the whole hierarchy of family, Rama would have to like listen to his mother. Versus if it was her son will listen to her and she can influence his decisions. Also, since she's a queen, she has the duty of a queen of the kingdom to make sure that the next king is someone who is supposed to be on the throne and worthy of being on the throne. And by making her son the king, she fails in her duty as a queen.
Perfect. Very nicely stated, Isa. And so if you guys have ever seen like Game of Thrones, I know it's already getting to be sort of an old show now. We see a lot of these same machinations, right? We see mothers trying to put sons on the throne because even though we talk about patriarchy as only being sort of this system for men to be in power, if I'm a mother and my son is on the throne, who really has power? Mom has power in that situation. And so in this case, that's what Kaikeyi is going for. She doesn't want to be forgotten. If Rama goes on the throne, there's the suggestion that maybe King Dasaratha would forget about her and Rama would forget about her. And just like Isa was saying, only Rama would care about his mother instead of her. So she would sort of be this has-been, this nobody, right? Very good. And just like Isa said too, as a queen, she has a duty to her nation to put the right person on the throne. And of course, Rama is the perfect man, right? He's a god incarnate. So how could he not be the best candidate for the job? Very good. So let's think about Dasaratha. Pleasure over duty. Angel says pleasure over duty. Why do you say that, Angel? There are a lot of examples of that, and it's sort of, you have to kind of dig a little bit to find it. So that's a bit of a harder question, but I agree with you. Why is the king going for pleasure over duty? Well, oh, there you go. He promised those two things just to marry her. Yeah. So if you go back to the backstory, he's just incredibly attracted to her, right? He was already married, and it's fine for a king to have multiple wives, but he's very attracted to her, and he makes a promise to her father. He basically says, let her marry me, and I will make her son the king. He makes this promise to her father. He also has these boons. We don't have to worry about the context. He was like fighting a war, right? She said, you offered me two boons. I forgot it on the battlefield, blah, blah, blah. So she saves him and he owes her, right? In reward for what she gave to him. So he was putting his pleasure, his pursuit of having a beautiful wife and his love for her, he was putting that over his other duties. He didn't know that this would bite him in the end, but he is being presented as this kind of desirous old man in a way, right? Duty as a husband versus duty as a king, all of a sudden those come into conflict. Duty as a husband versus duty as a father, those also come into conflict. And just like Isa said, it ultimately takes his life, right? These conflicts ultimately kill him because he can't reconcile these conflicts of his duty. Pretty intense stuff. And of course, Rama, how does he feel all about it? He's like, yeah, no problem. 14 years in the woods, sign me up, right? He's ready to go. Yeah, exactly. The old bridegroom was intoxicated with the spectacle of Kaikeyi's beauty and youth, was prepared to promise anything. So again, we get the sense that he was putting pleasure above anything else. And here's Rama being a good boy, saying that's exactly what he wants to do. Just to wrap it up, we got 2 minutes. Eventually, he does go out into the woods, right? Rama kind of takes the burden on his own shoulders and he just says, okay, let's go out in the woods. So here is Rama, Sita, which is of course his wife, and Lakshmana, which is his brother. And so the three family members go out in the woods and they live in exile, like Dorian said a moment ago. Bharata tries to convince him to come back, and eventually they kind of have this duel of being polite. And what finally decides it is the gods on page 61, the very end of chapter 3. The gods show up and they say, hey, you guys quit arguing about this. Bharata, go back and rule on Rama's behalf for 14 years. Rama, you go back into exile and do what you're supposed to do. And so there's this sense that this has to happen, right? This is all part of fate. So there's this voice of fate that comes in the end. So to come back, I think it was Angel's point initially, that maybe it's not really Kaikeyi's fault. Yeah. We could blame all kinds of people. We could blame the king. We could blame Kaikeyi. We could blame Kaikeyi's handmaiden Kuni, or we could just say it's all fate, right? And so that's the power of the story. I know there are all these details and it's a little hard to wrap your mind around them, but once you get the building blocks, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff with it, which is of course why I'm teaching this in the first place. Okay, why don't we cut it off there? We didn't talk about Surpanaka yet, but we'll get to her next time, which is fine. Any last thoughts? We actually we saved the class pretty successfully after the initial book scare. Any last thoughts? We doing okay? So again, if you can't get the book, email me and I'll help you get one. All right.